This hour on I-24 News, the leaders of North and South Korea have agreed to work on denuclearizing the peninsula and reach a peace deal. Leaders around the world are expressing optimism and caution.
It's encouraging, and then we have to realize that it's still a lot of hard work that lies ahead of us.
In Israel, 2 staff members have been arrested for negligence over the death of 10 teenagers who were killed by flash flooding during a school trip.
President Trump spent the afternoon talking with German Chancellor Angela Merkel. She lobbied against pulling out of the Iran deal, but Mr. Trump dismissed suggestions of tension.
We have a really great relationship, and we actually have had a great relationship right from the beginning.
From the I-24 News studios in Times Square in New York, this is Crossroads with David Shuster and Tal Heinrich.
What a summit. The leaders of North and South Korea have agreed to work on removing nuclear arms from their peninsula, and they are pledging to pursue a peace deal that includes the United States.
Kim Jong-un, who at this summit became the first North Korean leader in history to set foot in the South, promised a new beginning. International Affairs correspondent Bianca Zanini has more.
Kim Jong-un and I declared together that there will be no more war on the Korean peninsula, and a new age of peace has begun.
We will make efforts to create good results by communicating closely.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un made history as he crossed the border into the south to meet his counterpart, Moon Jae-in. The two leaders shook hands, planted a tree, and raised the hope for actual peace on the Korean peninsula. The neighbors, enemies for more than 65 years and still technically at war, promised to finally sign a peace agreement by the end of this year and to solve the question at the heart of the conflict, denuclearization. Every detail of the day was carefully choreographed, from each seat around the negotiating table to the meat served at the dinner table, highlighting the symbolic weight and the importance of that meeting. Promises were made to urgently resolve the humanitarian issues of divided families, to ease military tensions with defense ministers set to meet in May, to denuclearize and to meet again, next time in Pyongyang. Meanwhile, just months ago it seemed the countries were on the brink of war. Perhaps President Trump's policy of strength and unpredictability scared the North into finally talking. Or maybe Kim Jong-un simply got so close to reaching his goal of full nuclear capability that he can now come to the table from a position of strength. Perhaps it was the recent reports on the partial collapse of North Korea's main nuclear test site that put Kim under pressure. Either way, this surprising 180 in international diplomacy is a reason to celebrate, but also to worry. North Korea has promised to denuclearize before, so this next chapter of hope will inevitably be sprinkled with a dash of cold, hard skepticism. Bianca Zanini, I-24 News.
President Trump also addressed the summit during his Oval Office meeting with Chancellor Angela Merkel today.
Yeah, that's right. President Trump hailed the Korean agreement as a great success. Reporters then asked Mr. Trump if Kim Jong-un can be trusted.
Oh, I don't think he's playing. No, I don't think he's playing. And you know, it's never gone like this. It's never gone this far. I don't think it's ever had this enthusiasm for them wanting to make a deal. And yeah, I agree. The United States has been played beautifully like a fiddle because you had a different kind of a leader. We're not going to be played, okay? We're going to hopefully make a deal.
The president also fired back at some of his critics who questioned his negotiating skills.
Things have changed very radically from a few months ago. You know, the name calling and a lot of other things. We get a kick every once in a while out of the fact that I'll be watching people that failed so badly over the last 25 years explaining to me how to make a deal with North Korea. I get a big kick out of that.
To discuss all this, let's bring in Mark Tokola, who's the Vice President of the Korea Economic Institute of America. And Mark, you share the president's assessment that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is being serious about reaching a deal, and there's every reason to trust him?
Well, it's saying too much to say there's every reason to trust him, but he has made some concessions. It was a concession for him to travel to Panmunjom in South Korea rather than insisting that Moon Jae-in come to Pyongyang. That's different. And Kim Jong-un also did not insist on the suspension of the joint U.S.-South Korean military exercises, which they've always done before. So he has moved in the right direction.
So how do you read these methods, these tactics of negotiations on the part of North Korea?
Well, I think it's interesting that Kim Jong-un kept referring during his meeting with Moon Jae-in to the reason that previous agreements failed. He kept saying they were not implemented fully. And he kept saying this new agreement must be implemented. So it's important to go back, I think, and look at the previous agreements to see what he thinks went wrong with them.
And what are those problems that he saw with those previous agreements?
Well, he's not talking about the 1992 or 2005 pledge to not develop nuclear weapons. I think he's talking about the 2007 agreement, which promised quite a bit of North-South economic cooperation and investment. That didn't come to be. And I think given North Korea's economic state, I think he may be looking for an easing of sanctions and maybe some more direct economic assistance.
But he's got to know that that's not going to happen until there's verifiable proof that he has started essentially taking apart his nuclear weapons program, right?
I think that's right. I mean, Moon Jae-in's talked about the need to have a step-by-step process where there'd have to be some concrete denuclearization exchange for some concrete steps on easing sanctions or providing assistance. But it'll be a step-by-step process and probably a quite slow one.
You know, Mark, some say that this meeting would have never taken place if it wasn't for President Trump. I even read one headline today suggesting that the president deserves a Nobel Peace Prize for that. What is your view?
Well, we don't know. We can't be sure, as your lead in piece said, about whether this is a result of the sanctions policy, which actually has started to bite North Korea, or if it's a result of North Korea's concern about the belligerency from Washington, or concern because of Chinese pressure to join in talks, or maybe just this time the North Koreans have reached the point where they've successfully tested nuclear weaponry and are moving on to negotiations. In the New Year's speech in 2018, Kim Jong-un said the nuclear program was now complete and it was time to turn to the economy.
But what about the reports that they have a nuclear test facility that is essentially collapsing in and of itself? Wouldn't that suggest that between not having that facility, the sanctions having some bite, North Caribbean squeeze, that the president perhaps does deserve some credit for forcing the Chinese and essentially pinching the North Korean regime?
Oh, I think he does. I think it's part of all those things you mentioned. There's lots of factors at stake. And I would not take away anything from President Trump for having gotten to the point we're at now. The question now is what happens during the next summit.
And what do you think will happen during the next summit?
That is highly unpredictable. We've never had a direct talk between the President of the United States and President of North Korea. Both leaders seem to want to get something done quickly. We're going to have to wait and see what happens. The top-down approach is unprecedented and a little bit unpredictable.
And then, Mark, finally, I mean, there's quite an age difference between President Moon there on the right, who is, what, 65 years old, and Kim Jong-un, who's 36. And yet it seemed like Kim seemed to carry himself a bit older than his years. Is that how you read both the body language and sort of the presence that both of these leaders had during all of this?
Yeah, I wouldn't try to overinterpret the body language, but Kim Jong-un is clearly not in terrific physical condition. He looked winded from that walk he had to make. Moon Jae-in is very fit, as you can see, despite the difference in age.
Yeah, definitely an outstanding picture.
Yes. All right. Mark Tokola, Vice President of the Korean Economic Institute of America. Mark, thanks so much for coming on. We appreciate it. What do you make of all these pictures from the summit?
You know what I'm thinking, David? We're all trying to figure out why suddenly North Korea has shifted towards diplomacy. And I think it's also that changed. Suddenly, you no longer see tweets about the little rocket man, right? International media suddenly celebrates all these meetings and negotiations. And also, you know, we tend to forget all the stories about the man who fed his uncle alive to hungry dogs.
I mean, he's a survivor, right? I mean, he kills his family because he sees them as threats. And so what he's doing clearly now, I think, seems to be he is trying to survive, have his country survive, and he's willing to do whatever it takes to perhaps lift the economic sanctions, even if that means talking directly with President Trump. And it was so striking when the president was asked by a reporter today, have you had direct conversations with Kim Jong-un? And the president very quickly said, I'm not going to talk about it.
Your thoughts?
He didn't deny it. So
Your
I think
thoughts?
My thoughts is they have had discussions, and I think, again, Kim Jong-un is incredibly smart, according to Mike Pompeo, the former CIA director who just met with him over Easter weekend. The question, again, to your point is this all something of a ruse in which Kim Jong-un is trying to get some relief and is willing to put on whatever face he needs to and meet with whoever he needs to in order to ease up so that his own domestic challenges are continued to put down? Or is he legitimately now had a change of heart and feels satisfied that his nuclear program is where it needs to be, and now he's got a position